You're standing in front of the bathroom mirror one ordinary morning, 12 months after the night you decided to disappear. The yellow light falls on your face, and for a moment you don't fully recognize the person looking back at you. A more defined jaw, broader shoulders, calmer eyes. Not the fake calm of someone pretending to be fine. That new, quiet calm of someone who no longer owes anyone any explanations. Your phone is on the sink, switched off. You haven't opened social media in months. You haven't replied to unnecessary messages in months. You haven't gone to parties, asked for opinions, or sought validation in almost a year. And as you silently observe yourself, you understand something it took you far too long to accept. The previous version of you needed to exist for others. The current version of you exists because it finally stopped doing that. But to understand how you got to this moment, we have to go back to the night when everything hurt so much that you changed without telling anyone. That night, nothing extraordinary happened. You weren't fired, you weren't left, you weren't betrayed. You just finished your day like any other day, sat on the edge of your bed, and looked at your room in silence. Clothes that didn't fit you well, books you'd been promising yourself you'd read for years, a phone full of notifications from people you didn't really care about. And suddenly you felt something you had never felt so clearly. You weren't unhappy because of one single thing. You were unhappy because of an entire version of yourself that you had been carrying for years as if it were your identity. And you understood something that would change everything. You didn't need to change what you were doing. You needed to change who you were being. That night, you made the quietest decision of your life. You were going to disappear from the radar for a whole year. No announcements, no posts, no speeches, no dramatic scenes. No one was going to find out until the change was so big that you wouldn't need to explain it. You started with the simplest thing. You logged out of social media. You deleted the apps that took your time without giving anything back. You muted the message groups that drained your energy without you realizing it. And for the first time in years, your phone stopped talking to you like a constant boss. The first weeks were uncomfortable in a strange way. Not because you were bored, but because you started to hear thoughts of your own that had been buried under the noise for years. You realized that most of your opinions weren't yours. They were echoes of people you barely knew. You realized how much free time you had when you stopped scrolling without purpose. You realized that certain friendships only existed because you were the one who always wrote first. And when you stopped doing it, they simply disappeared. No drama, no complaint, no nostalgia. They just disappeared. And you learned something painful but liberating. Many relationships you thought were deep only existed because you were willing to make them exist alone. Meanwhile, you started building things in silence. You woke up earlier, not because some influencer recommended it, but because you understood that the first hours of the day were the only ones the world hadn't yet borrowed from you. You started training, without posting the gym, without telling anyone how much you weighed, without asking for advice in groups. Just you, a simple routine, and the commitment to show up every day even when you didn't feel like it. You started reading, not the fashionable books, but the ones that confronted you with uncomfortable truths about yourself. You started eating better, not because you wanted to look good, but because you understood that your body was the first house you had and you had been neglecting it for years. And then came the phase that almost no one survives. The middle phase. Not enough months had passed yet to see clear results, but enough had passed to feel lonely. Your old friends stopped inviting you because you always said no. Your family started asking if you were okay, because you were no longer the person you used to be. Some people thought you were going through a crisis. Others thought you were being arrogant. And no one, absolutely no one, understood that you were actually rebuilding yourself from the inside out. And there you understood something you could never forget. People never applaud the process. They only applaud the result. And most of the people who see you change are going to try to pull you back before they accept that you moved forward without them. There were nights when you almost gave up. Nights when you opened your phone looking to contact someone just to feel less alone. Nights when you stood in front of the mirror and asked yourself if all that discipline was worth it. But then you did something simple. You went to sleep without opening the chat. You got up the next day and stuck to your routine without arguing with yourself. You learned something that no book had ever explained to you properly before. Discipline isn't saying yes to your routine when you feel like it. Discipline is saying yes when you don't feel like it, when it hurts, when you feel invisible, when no one is watching, when there's no immediate reward. And the more often you made that decision, the more something inside you strengthened, something you didn't even know existed before. Month 6 arrived, and you started to notice small things. Your clothes fit differently. Your face had less visual weight, more structure. Your responses to people became shorter, clearer, less anxious. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped justifying yourself. You stopped having to give long versions of yourself so others would understand your decisions. You started talking less and observing more. And as that happened, your inner peace grew at a rate that had nothing to do with your material achievements. Because you understood that the problem had never been what you had. The problem had always been what you were carrying mentally, unnecessarily. And then something new appeared. You started having time to spare. Time that used to go into watching other people's lives now went into building your own. You started learning skills you had been putting off for years. You learned about money, about investing, about how to build income that didn't depend solely on your salary. You started making quiet financial decisions that none of your friends would understand at the time. You stopped spending on things you no longer needed to impress people you no longer cared about. You put your money to work, not out of urgency, but out of conviction. And while your external life seemed boring from the outside, on the inside you were assembling a completely different structure. Month 9 arrived, and something changed in the way you moved through the world. You walked differently without knowing it. People started treating you differently in everyday places. Waiters were more attentive. Strangers looked at you a second longer. People at work consulted you about things they hadn't consulted you about before. Without having said anything, without having announced anything, your energy was communicating something that words could not have communicated for you. And you understood another important thing. The world doesn't treat you based on who you say you are. The world treats you based on who you actually are, and that information is transmitted long before you open your mouth. When month 11 arrived, you received the message you knew would eventually come. One of the people who had abandoned you at the start of the process, one of the people who thought you were weird, one of the people who assumed you would fail, wrote to you out of nowhere. The message was casual, friendly, as if nothing had happened. As if the last 11 months had been a misunderstanding. You read the message in silence. You felt no rage, no pride, no need to reply quickly. For the first time in your life, you didn't need that person's approval to feel complete. And there you discovered the greatest gift of the entire process. You had stopped needing the people who used to make you feel incomplete. When you finally reappeared, it wasn't a dramatic entrance. It wasn't a post announcing your transformation. It wasn't a speech, a video, or a statement. You simply started seeing people face to face again, and you let them draw their own conclusions. Some didn't recognize you physically. Others recognized you but noticed that something invisible in you had changed. Some tried to treat you as if you were the same person and realized that person no longer existed. And you, in silence, without bragging, without needing to tell your story, understood something you could never erase from your memory. People transform themselves alone. But only after accepting that for a while, they are going to have to be alone. And as you observed your new life, your new mind, your new body, your new finances, your new peace, you realize something even deeper. Most people spend their entire lives seeking a public transformation. They want to change and have the world applaud. They want to improve and have everyone see it. They want to grow and have every step documented. But real transformations don't work that way. Real transformations happen in silence. In the hours no one sees. In the decisions no one applauds. In the renunciations no one understands. In the days when nothing seems to progress, but you keep showing up anyway. And then you understood the real secret. You didn't become better when you started doing more. You became better when you stopped doing what had been preventing you from being yourself. The transformation wasn't addition. It was subtraction. And as you look at the people around you now, the ones who came into your life after the change, the ones who appeared when you no longer needed them to appear, the ones who treat you differently without knowing why, you understand one final thing that few are willing to accept. The world does not reward the one who shouts the loudest. It rewards the one who dares to disappear long enough to come back as someone else.